Again, welcome. For those of you that are returning, thank you for returning. And for those of you that are new, thank you for being taking a chance and being involved and coming to this event. The Analytics Think Tank Roundtables started from really my frustration. I was frustrated with all the different sort of talking head conferences where the conversations were very unidirectional. You would go in, you hear someone talk, and then you would leave, and then what? Nothing happened. You didn't know how to apply it. You didn't really absorb it. It wasn't immersed. So I decided to create this roundtable concept where it used to physically be roundtables, pre-COVID, where we would break into smaller groups and have deeper conversations with a discussion lead helping stimulate that conversation. Then we come back together and sort of summarize and talk about what we talked about. And so we may even call on some of you guys to sort of tell us what your team said during the breakout sessions. So that's the way the Analytics Think Tank Roundtable sessions tend to work. Okay, so this would be the around 13th or 14th. I don't really know. I started them a long time ago and now I just keep doing them. And they're good for networking and immersion and learning. So today's topic is about getting analytics adopted. So you can produce analytics, but is it really getting consumed? And some of the statistics and things that I'm hearing are a little bit disturbing. If you worked at a manufacturing plant producing widgets and 85% of your widgets didn't work or didn't make it into production, I'd be very concerned about your widget producing. So this is sort of the state of where we are with analytics not always being adopted or absorbed or really truly consumed the way we want them to. And that's the topic of our discussion. With that, Jerry and Brian, I'm going to let you guys take it away to talk about the importance of analytics adoption.
Awesome, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Jerry Damaso. I run Enablement at Axis Group, which is a line of business that really focuses on behavioral transformation from the perspective of getting people to integrate data into their daily decision making. That's really like the crux of what we do, is how do we get people to use data to inspire decisions that they make. Obviously, that's much easier said than done. There are a million different moving pieces, and when we're trying to make that transformation happen across hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people, that can present a lot of challenges. But today I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes specifically about adoption and what common barriers that we see. And I'm also joined by Brian Coley from Georgia Power, who will introduce himself in a minute and provide some real world experiences from his analytics journey. So let's jump right in. Start off with, what is analytics adoption? I'm sure you've heard this term a lot, but what is it really? There's a bunch of different definitions that I've seen, but we like to keep it simple. We define analytics adoption as the integration of data into decision making, often assisted by analytics tools. Doesn't necessarily have to be assisted by analytics tools, but for the purposes of what we're talking about analytics tools. But it's very simple. It's not about session duration. It's not about number of clicks on filters. It's not about how many reports were opened or how many algorithms were used. Those are leading indicators and KPIs for how we can measure and benchmark our adoption, but it's really about are people integrating data into their decision making? That's the crux of it. That's the key. I think we can all agree that that would be great if we could get everybody to integrate data into their decision making, but that doesn't happen. So why doesn't that happen? What are the common barriers to adoption that we see? These are really the three primary barriers to adoption. I have a problem and I don't know that a solution to my problem exists, even though one does exist, right? We build those widgets all the time, but if people don't know about those widgets, they can't really even go about looking for them. Or maybe they know that a solution exists. Somebody told them, hey, this dashboard solves your problem, or this algorithm solves your problem. Great, but I don't know how to use it, so I'm not going to use it. Or I know a solution exists and I know how to use it, but my data is wrong. These are the three most common barriers to adoption that we see. So just walk through them really quickly. to get to some solutions. Well, what is the real problem if I don't know that my solution or a solution to my problem exists? The real problem is internal marketing, right? Analytics is a product that's competing for attention. Everything we do competes for people's attention, especially in the virtual world right now, where there's just tons of things flying across people's computer screens. We still have to compete for adoption just like any other product. It helps when there are corporate objectives that say, hey, we're going to be more analytics or data driven. But even if they do, you still have to market to people to get them to understand where the solutions are and how it can help them, just like any other product. If you know a solution exists, but you don't know how to use it, that could be a combination, usually a combination of UX design and education. So a well-designed product should really need minimal training or education, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't need any education, especially if it's outside of people's comfort zones or there's some technical complexity to it. We want to create usable, useful, desirable dashboards and reports, but we also need to make sure people know how to use them. And finally, solution exists, we know how to use it, but the data is wrong. That goes back to data quality and governance. A lack of data quality, or sometimes more importantly, the perception of a lack of data quality is the #1 reason people abandon solutions in our experience. If the data is wrong, or even if they think it's wrong because they don't know how to use it, or they've clicked on a filter that doesn't really make sense with the data model that you've created, they're going to abandon it and most likely not come back to it unless they have some specific reason to. Most analytics tools, they either have log files or add-ons to track data quality. Use those, invest in those. It's definitely worth it, because it's, like I said, it's the #1 reason we see for people abandoning solutions. I know I'm going through this quickly. We can go through in more depth in some of the breakout sessions. But what can you do about this stuff today? Some of this stuff will be pretty high level. Obviously, we only have a couple of minutes, but like I said, there's built-in tools or external logs. You can measure those leading indicators like, abandon rate, like session duration, number of clicks, that sort of stuff. You can also reach out to active, or sometimes more valuably, once active users to understand what their challenges were or what successes that they're having. So you can use those to inform what else you're working on and how you reach out to other people. This one is critical. We do this all the time. Observing somebody who uses your solution without any guidance, even though it's going to probably make you twitch, like to watch somebody use something that they don't know how to use it. But write down the challenges that they're having, and that can really help inform what the user experience should be. Where are they clicking? Where are they looking? Where do their eyes go on the screen? It's a little harder during COVID, but you can probably do it with a camera and a screen share. And finally, just keep in mind that analytics solutions themselves, an algorithm, a dashboard, a report, they're just a means to an end. They aren't the end. We don't create those things because we want to have a bunch of those things. We want to create those things so that people can actually use them and make better decisions for our business. So that's kept it to 4 minutes. Excellent. I'll hand it off to Brian to actually go through some real world experience that he's had on his journey. But thank you. Take it away, Ryan.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Jerry. So I'm Brian Coley. I lead our market intelligence team at Georgia Power Company within our sales and marketing department. We focus on primary research, secondary research, and data analytics. And so to Jerry's point, right, we've been through some of this journey, but I call it a journey because it seems like it never ends. There's sort of a arrival point at, hey, we're great at adopting analytics. So I guess that's the first point is, I don't think you ever arrive. I think you continue to evolve. And what we've seen is, and in my experience, right, you kind of have to evaluate where you are. There's the Gartner chart, which if you've seen that, there's descriptive and diagnostic analytics all the way to predictive and prescriptive. Those 4 sort of ideas of increasing analytical value and understanding the data that you have and how to apply it. So that's a great way to look at it. From a utility perspective, Georgia Power, we partner with Utility Analytics Institute, UAI, and have done a lot of work with them. They have a similar chart. I think it has maybe 8 or 10 different, categories of that, but they're very similar to the Gartner categories. So I would say start with where you are, right? This is not rocket science, but start with where you are. Where is it along that chart that you are? How much data do you have? How are you currently applying it? And who knows about it? A big part of analytics adoption is communication. If your leadership team and the teams that will leverage the data and the analytics don't understand how it's being applied or what it means, you have a communication hurdle to get over. And so understanding where you are, communicating it clearly, and then understanding where you want to go. From a cultural perspective, you need to understand, where your company is and where you can go with it. One anecdote of that is we have a lot of people out in the field who are directly tied to customers. We call them key account managers, and they do a great job understanding their specific key accounts and those types of things. And from an analytical perspective, sometimes we'll do analytics with market data that may disagree with what a customer has told us with boots on the ground. How do you reconcile that? Who's right? Is it right and wrong? And it's not necessarily that at all either. It's understanding what the analytics are telling you, being able to share that and apply that in a way that's helpful to your sales team, in our case, our key account managers, and then learning from them, taking that feedback from them and putting in that lens onto your analysis to say, were we wrong with our analysis? And so our goal, I think, internal to market intelligence, my team at Georgia Power, is to give the analytics and the boots on the ground equal footing. And so that's kind of our vision and our mission moving forward, is to help our teams with market data and external data, as well as hearing directly from customers and pairing those up and making sure that our sales teams can be effective. So the way that we're leveraging that, again, primary research, going out and hearing directly from those customers, secondary research, looking out into the marketplace of what else we're hearing from our specific markets, large customer groups, things like that, and then data analysis. We have a captive set of data where we can see how much our customers are using our energy on a monthly basis, because we bill them through that. How are we leveraging that information, the contact information that we have, and the ongoing flow of that data? How are we leveraging that to help our customers, right, be as energy efficient as they can be as productive as they can be, grow their businesses, because when they grow, we grow. And so we're partnering with our field employees, our key account managers, as I mentioned, to help do those kind of things. So if I could sum it up quickly, I would say understand where you are, map out where you want to be, and then clearly communicate that path as you feed analytics into it, so that you're connecting with those people along the way that can help you out. Making small wins along the way also helps as you do that. But analytics adoption is not something that happens overnight, so it's definitely a journey. And so as we sort of talk more about this, I look forward to discussing that journey with all of you as we go along. So
That's great. Thank you.
thank you.
And I don't think anybody really has this perfectly down. I've got, of all the companies that I talk to, and prospects and clients and former clients and just colleagues and things like that, there is one company that says, we're pretty good at it. Everybody else I know says, no, we need help. So this is not something that sort of comes organically. I do like the fact that we're starting to see some attention toward this, and that it's not just, oh, well, if we build it, they will come. It's a very deliberate sort of thing. And I'm starting to see position postings that call for analytics enablement, digital dexterity. What else are people calling it? Analytics adoption, analytics champion, or transformation agent, things like that. So there is some attention that's coming this way, which is great. Okay, so next we have this lovely panel, which I'm very happy to bring to you guys. And on the panel, we're going to moderate a few questions, which, spoiler alert, I'm going to go ahead and show you those questions. But I'm going to have each panelist first do a quick introduction. We've got Brian from Georgia Power, Marcel from Siemens, and John from University of South Carolina. So let's start off with a few questions for the panelists that I have structured. And then when we close that out, if we have a little bit of time, we might be able to ask the panelists a few questions. So if you want to put those in the chat, feel free to do that. So Brian, I'll start with you just because your picture shows up first. Can you give us a quick introduction? I know you gave us a little bit of something here already.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I manage our market intelligence function at Georgia Power within sales and marketing. To tell you a little bit more about myself, I have a background in mechanical engineering and an MBA. So I'm not a data analysis person, so to speak, but I'm an engineer, so I understand the technical pieces of this. And definitely from a business perspective, trying to implement these types of things within our sales business has been a challenge, and has been a fun challenge to champion here at Georgia Power. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic, thank you. And Brian has been very involved in kind of the whole Beverly orbit. Like he's helped with some of my nonprofit stuff. He's been a judge for different competitions. He's served as a subject matter expert. Georgia Power is a former client of mine. They're also a former employer of mine. He used to work for Southern Company. So Brian and I have been here and there for several years, and he's just been a great resource. Marcel?
Yeah, hi. My name is Marcel. I'm part of the Siemens family, a global tech company. I'm in the healthcare industry sector, and I'm heading there the data governance and management group within the sales, marketing and sales function. I just want to add one piece of adoption of my private life, which I think not derailing the discussion, but maybe add some context. So I think the biggest adoption for me in life was always not how people like the analytics, but when I moved here into the US 5 years ago, this was a big adoption for me, and I'm very happy that this adoption is not over yet, because I have those chances of meeting nice people and interesting people as we do today. So I'm looking very much forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. I love all the advancements within the healthcare field, so I'm interested to hear your perspectives. And John from University of South Carolina, can you introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, I can, Beverly. And thanks again for having me. My vocation is leading a team of sales professionals, a team of solution sales professionals for a large tech company, but I'm actually here by way of my new passion. I'm in my second semester as an adjunct at the Moore School, University of South Carolina, teaching sales strategy and sales enablement. Much of my background and usually my grounding is in process improvement. So when I look at the challenges that we're going to discuss today, that's normally where I start. How do we improve the process?
That's great. Thank you. And John is at U of SC, like he mentioned. It's also my school, and academia has a way of sucking us back in, doesn't it, John?
It has been so much fun, yes.
Yes. So we've got a lot of sales, kind of analytics used for sales purposes. So you'll kind of hear that bend a little bit from the panelists. And just a quick introduction for those that don't know me, I'm Beverly Wright. I've been in analytics for about 30 years. I've been in academic side for about 17, teaching undergrads, masters, doctoral students, and executives. I spent about 12 years in consulting. Now I'm the chief analytics strategist at Axis Group, which is co-sponsor. And I'm also at University of South Carolina as a clinical professor, and I lead the Center for Applied Business Analytics as well at University of South Carolina. I've also spent time on the practitioner side, where I was at Southern Company, been at Cox Communications as well, and spent a little bit of time at Truist, formerly SunTrust. That name just I can't quite get a hang of it yet, but I'm gonna get a hang of Truist eventually. So it's just SunTrust was such a good brand name. So that's a little bit about myself. I'll be the moderator. So I'm going to deliver the structured questions to the panelists. And as mentioned, if we have time for some unstructured kind of free-flowing questions at the end, then we'll try to make time for that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that you can see your lovely panelists a little bit better. And let's see, Melissa, is there a way to pin them? If you can't, then I will. But I'll go ahead and start the questions for the panelists. So the first question is, we're talking about analytics adoption, and just as a quick, what do we mean by analytics? Can you give us some examples, panel, about what do we mean? Like when we say analytics adoption, does that mean people reading reports? Like what do we mean by analytics, first of all, and then what do we mean by adoption?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. One example I'll give of analytics that we've done, and I think our analyst is actually on the call who did this for us, but one of these that I participated in, I think before we all went in lockdown, was the electric transportation challenge, I think, Beverly, that you hosted with Porsche, trying to help understand where charging stations can go and electric vehicle adoption and all that. And so we took that at Georgia Power. We also are big fans of electric transportation. We are the fuel provider, if you will, for electric cars or forklifts or anything of that nature that we say if you can move it, or if it moves people or stuff, you can move it with electricity. And so we looked at expanding our community charging program. So if you live in Georgia, there are Georgia Power community charging locations across the state where you can drive most of the state of Georgia with our charging network. There are a few others, Electrify America, they will probably fill in the gaps. But we have received some additional funding from the Public Service Commission to be able to expand that charging network. So we have to add about 12 additional sites by the end of, I think, this year or next year. So that's currently in the works. And what we wanted to do is understand where should these go. And so one thing we looked at was where are additional people who are going to buy the vehicles going to live right now. If you just put them where people live now, that doesn't look like a representative sample of all of the people that live in Georgia. We know that vehicle adoption will increase. So where will it increase? And so we looked at a propensity model basically of different data inputs, whether it be, income level, geographic location, things like that, trying to predict who the next two sets of EV adopters would be. So the most likely and then the next most likely, right? So if we're in early adopters, right, who's the early majority, and those types of things. So we tried to look at it from a data perspective to say, who are the next two groups that will adopt? Where are they located? So literally plotted them on a map and handed that to our team so that they can look at it and say, all right, we know currently where the drivers are, currently where our chargers are. We can look at distances between that and where the next set of drivers will be, and gave them the information they needed to make decisions on where those additional 12 locations will be. So I thought that was a pretty cool application, predictive model of data analysis that gave us some additional locations. So fun
okay, so a predictive type of solution that is action oriented. So that would be an example of both analytics and the adoption side. Like you've seen action from it and a predictive model. Okay. Right. How about any other panelists want to speak up?
Yeah, so I'd like to add a use case that we are currently driving. It's called Digital Sales Companion. And the idea is that we want to free up time of our sales force, free up time that they spend in doing administrative stuff and maintaining, sales opportunities or maintaining protocols about customer visits and stuff like this. And the main challenge is that in order to do that successful, you need first very precisely define the use cases that you really want to target with this companion, and what are the actions that you want to help the sales rep with. Because if you start building a kind of like overarching, I don't know, Alexa for the sales reps, they most likely will not use it, because why should they use it? There's no need in there, right? And if you really find a problem that helps them, like if you automate that, that frees up their time and they can really focus on the big things and selling stuff and increasing their quota and in the end getting their money in their pocket, that's something that really drives them, and that is something that helps. And we are looking in some areas of predictive modeling, of predicting the next best action for a sales rep to close a deal. So what is the next action that makes sense in terms of that deal, as well as kind of like recommending, for instance, people that they should contact or should add to their network, because that there is some connection between peoples, and we are looking into scraping social network information and stuff like this. So that's just at the beginning, but it's a it's a big thing that will keep us busy for the next years.
Yeah, no, so using AI type solutions, and you mentioned usability. So it's not a good thing if it's not usable. It could be the greatest thing ever, but if it's not usable. And you also mentioned leveraging automation whenever possible.
Right.
Very nice. Okay. And then John, did you have anything you wanted to add? We talked about predictive models, action-based, usability and comprehension, understanding, AI types of initiatives, leveraging automation. Did you have anything you wanted to add as far as like, what do we mean when we talk about analytics adoption?
So sure, I'll give you a recent use case. So oftentimes I'm called on to support the development of sales training. And I find that in many cases, it's not a data-based type of exercise. People do it much more by feel and observation and psychology and so forth. And what I always try to do is back up whatever we're doing with data, CRM being a very obvious one. And I always love the challenge because it's very macro and micro, because what we've got to work with is a corporate level sales process. At the same time, we've got to work with what an individual sales professional is going to do. So if I'm able to use that CRM data, for example, and point to breakdowns or gaps in the process, and then balance it out with observation and engagement with the sales professionals, we have a much better chance of creating training and a program for the sales professionals that's going to work and have the impact that we want it to.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, now that we sort of have an understanding, at least a rudimentary one to start with, of what do we mean by analytics adoption, let's talk about what is the big deal? Like why? So one of the things that I sort of pick on students about, or anybody on my team, is if they show a presentation and they say, as you can see. It drives me insane. You've probably heard me say that before, haven't you, Brian? But when people say, as you can see, that's, sometimes the person can't see it. They don't see it. They don't know what you're talking about. But for quants, the people that are left brain, like a lot of people on this call, we see it instantly. Like we could look at data and kind of see patterns because we're sort of used to that world. But the whole, as you can see, is not, it makes the assumption that, well, of course they're going to see it. Of course, they're going to do something about it. But that's not the case. Why is that not the case? What are the barriers? Like, what is it that makes it difficult for people to adopt analytics?
Beverly, may I answer this? I mean, I want to build on this statement, as you can see, or as somebody can see, right? I mean, if somebody needs that argument to bring across the need for that analytic solution, I feel that this person is not putting himself into the shoes of the consumer, right? Because it's his perspective that he feels that it is very obvious what this analytics solution should present and should target. But I think the challenge that we always feel is that we need to talk to the right people, really precisely focus that use case to that user group and make it relevant for them. So answering the question, what is in for you? That I feel is more valid statement as kind of like as you can see, as anybody can see.
Mm-hmm. So making it more relevant is a problem. That's one of the barriers, is that sometimes, I think, is that what you're implying, that one of the barriers is that sometimes two things that I heard from you. One is we don't make it relevant. Sometimes we think about like, this is the data and we focus on what it says without making it necessarily relevant to the consumer. And the second thing you mentioned is to really be in the shoes, sometimes literally, of the consumer. And what I mean when I say literally, when I used to work at Atlanta Gaslight, I was working with industrial data, and there was all this data that we were getting from the plants, that were our consumers, our clients, and we used to call them ratepayers, which sounds terrible, but our customers. And I said, if we're going to use this data and we're going to do all this stuff to it, I really want to put on my boots and go out to the field. I want to walk through and see how, this company is melting glass with our natural gas. Like, I want to see it. Yep. And so that's kind of what you're talking about, is live in the shoes and make things relevant.
Yep.
Okay. What are some of the other barriers? Like, why, we all know this is difficult. Why is this so difficult?
Yeah, so Beverly, to add to that, you don't want to take for granted or assume that everyone values analytics the way that you do, or understands the value of analytics the way that you do. So, sometimes it's challenging, as you can see, you may think that this is a great analysis and it tells you all these great and wonderful strategic things, but other people may not make that connection quite as clearly. And so, the barrier and the challenge to that is communicating the value of your analytics isn't always as straightforward as we understand. And so, communicating that both up the chain and to your peers tends to be a challenge. And I think the other piece of that is, looking more broadly and with a macro lens, I think analytics and data are sort of currency of the future, strategic competitive advantage for your companies. And so if you're not looking at data and that analytical skills and things like that, and building those into your company, I think you're falling behind already. Not everyone sees that either. So being able to communicate those things and understand those things and make that message known is sometimes difficult. And I think that is one of the barriers that we run into on a regular basis.
Just the lack of, I want to say education, or at least understanding or appreciation that people might have for analytics as a discipline.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Any other big barriers we want to discuss before we dive to the next question?
So I have an admission. I'm definitely one of the, as you can see, people, at least in my first thought. It's where I'm an analytic introvert. So it's preferable for me to see it and expect everybody else to see it. That makes life a lot easier. But I always come back to that Gartner definition that says it's got to be context specific and actionable. And that, as the other panelists have said, that means people. So even though I prefer to just work with the data and be in my own space, it's useless unless I come up with something or I'm working with something that is actionable and has a context that's really brought to it by the people involved.
Okay, so let's see some of the barriers that we've talked about so far. This is great, by the way, guys. I love this. Being in the shoes of the analytic consumer, having relevance, not just reporting the results of the model or the metrics, but making it relevant. Understanding the value. Sometimes there's a lack of understanding the value or the appreciation for the analytics data science discipline. And that can certainly be a barrier. At the end of the day, it is about people. So in some ways, understanding people, making things actionable, we don't always do that, and that's a big barrier. And nobody's actually said this yet, but I sense there's a tinge of a lack of trust sometimes. Like if you go to, if I were to, I'm not a big jewelry person, but if I were to go buy a diamond, I have no idea, what to look for, or I just have to count on that person. Or if I go, get my car worked on, or heck, if you can go to the doctor, I don't know much about anatomy and biology and all that kind of stuff. And so in the same kind of way, the consumer of the analytic has to have a little bit of trust. And none of y'all actually said it outright, but I felt like there was a flavor of that. Am I misreading? Or tell me where trust, is that a barrier sometimes where people don't trust what we're going to say?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that one. I think trust is important. The question is, can you order trust? So can you make somebody trusting it, or is it more an intrinsic motivation to, yes, I trust that source, or I trust that analytics? And I think in the end, it is as well connected to what John said. I think if we don't create analytics that is actionable, people will not use it. If it's actionable, they will use it. They will spread the word. They will say, okay, it's usable. And then with this, there comes a kind of like trust that is expressed through the community of the users. And that may help or may hinder the adoption, because if you got a bad reputation, then you can try to convince people that this source is trustworthy or the analytics product is trustworthy, but I think it will be much harder, right?
Yeah.
And let's be honest, the analytics aren't always accurate. We like to think that as the analytical team that everything we do is great and wonderful and we don't ever make mistakes, but we also make mistakes and the analytics can be wrong. And so I'm seeing some of the stuff coming through the chat, right? Being able to trust the analytics comes from experience as well as accuracy and things like that. And so, yeah, if we are producing things on a regular basis that turn out to not be accurate, then yeah, you're going to lose trust and accountability in your process. So yeah, there is that piece of it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was mentioned. Go ahead.
Oh, and I spend all my time in the B2B world, right? So the two words that often go together are analytics and collaboration. And oftentimes the best value that I find for the analytics is to drive or facilitate or really motivate the collaboration, which again, to keep circling back to the idea of the data and the people combined.
Good point, yeah, John.
Let's see, what was I going to ask? Oh, right. There was a comment in the chat that talked about how trust is a little bit like a snowball, and how you have to sort of, you can't start with the the biggest, most important, critical decision of the company. It has to be sort of smaller wins where you illustrate over and over with data how you can improve decision making, and then trust sort of builds from that. So that was a great point. We're going to skip around just a little bit because I know we have about
Beverly,
6. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for that, but it just comes to my mind. I think the idea of those little successes, right? You also need to market those, because if you don't communicate, if you don't spread the good word, the bad word will always be always overarching, and the voice will be louder. That's because people tend to listen to negative feedback, I think, more openly than to positive feedback. So I think I have no evidence on this, but I would just for my gut feeling, I would say I think you need 3 positive ratings, or 5 maybe, to overcome one of the negatives one, right? So I think it is very important to continue this communication path and really communicate those little wins, yeah, even they are little, but just being in the ear of the audience.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, people forget sometimes that you have to advocate. I know some companies, like we're talking to a prospect right now, and they hired someone to advocate for analytics. Like that's this person's job, is to advocate. And so that's a really good point. And also related to that is to establish a set of sort of champions, because you can talk about how great your work is and your team's work and what you're producing, but if you have champions out there that are sort of singing your praises and talking about how you've helped them improve decision making, then that's awesome. So okay, if you were to look at, let's say you've got this island of companies, and on this island everybody has fully adopted analytics. They're with it, and then there's the rest of us, right? But on this island of fully adopted analytics, how can you tell? How can you look at a company and be like, they got it? What are some of those attributes?
If I could real quick just stay on the collaboration idea for a moment. One of the things that I would see is real high quality cross-functional engagement in solving the company's challenges. So if I'm looking at a team or a group that's trying to solve supply chain related issues or supply chain related challenge, I'm seeing sales professionals engaged in that challenge. I'm seeing customers involved in that challenge. I'm seeing order management people. I'm seeing but in a very collaborative fashion, as opposed to a linear fashion where we'll have this group work on it first, then that group next, and so forth. So I look for that form of engagement that's happening in the challenge in tackling the challenges in the projects.
So you can tell because they're collaborating, they're working together, they're truly coming as a team and solving a problem. That's one way that you can tell that this island of companies that have adopted analytics have got it.
Yep. If I ask
What
the
are some?
question of what have the customers said about that, or the answer is not, hey, we're going to ask them next. It's would they've been involved in this from the beginning.
Yeah, it's not. I forget how one of my colleagues said that it's like it's not the part where you lead and it's dead silence and all of a sudden, ta-da, this is the answer. It's you're along the way. They're a part of the journey. It's not a big ta-da at the end.
Yes.
Nice. Thank you, John.
I would also say a company, if a company would answer the question, are you arguing about data or are you arguing with data? And if they, whatever stake they take, but I think if they argue with data, it's a good sign that they have embraced analytics and they see the value of analytics. Because if they still argue about the data, then they struggle with adoption, they struggle with the version of truth and whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense. I think that would be, a point. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other final thoughts about what would this magical island of companies look like? Would they talk differently? Would they, is it only big companies? Like what is this island of companies that have adopted analytics and really embraced it and understand how to do that? What do they look like?
Yeah.
And are they making more money?
I mean, I think that's the theory, right? Is that they would be informed by their data, making predictive decisions in the marketplace, potentially even driving the marketplace that they operate in. I think the hard part about this question is I don't know if any company exists, right, that does this so very well. There are companies, they're big tech companies, of course, that analyze everything you do online and whatever, and so you can Social Dilemma on Netflix whenever you get time, but arguably are they even doing this well? So not to say that no one can do it at all, but I think back to what I said earlier, I think it's a journey, and I think it looks different probably for everyone, to be honest. So but I think you're right. I think there's additional profitability for companies that do this well. I think there is, additional, customer satisfaction. Now, all of those things that, you measure as your KPIs, I think you do those better when you're informed by the data that you have.
Perfect. Yeah, that's our hope, right? Is that they're more efficient and they're more profitable and they're more, on top of it, I guess they're operating their business the way in a more optimized manner. That's our hope, is that if they're adopting analytics, then they're hopefully running the right kind and answering the right questions to have a better company. That's awesome.
But also, if you look from an entire market perspective, I think if you have a market where you have a high adoption of analytics across the entire value chain in that market, I think the collaboration between the different parties, between the different companies, is much open because you are willing to share information, you're willing to use information, you maybe collaborate on solving problems downstream by making sure that you get access to whatever you need, and you share information that as well you make, for instance, your supplier more successful, and reducing downtimes, quality issues for you, and things like this, right? So I think it's also about collaborating beyond your own organization, I think.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely tend to want to hang out with our own people, like especially the quant and the data people want to sort of talk to our own, but we've got to immerse ourselves if we expect them to give back to us and to consume what we're providing. So this is great. Okay, our next section. Thank you guys so much to our panelists, and you guys are now going to roll into discussion lead role. So first, I'd like to call on Ron. Are you back on, Ron?
So we decided to answer bits and pieces of all three questions. So on the first one, what do you see as the most challenging barriers to analytics adoption? you know, you always have to be a consultant and help people to learn about analytics. And a couple of people noted some challenges just around tooling, because there's a constant shift between tools, and you know, there's a struggle to learn those tools. Excel is a common denominator, and when tools are moving around, that can be intimidating. Another huge challenge, aside from that just technical aspect of the tooling, is getting buy-in from managers. And one of the kind of underlying problems in getting that buy-in is that the folks on the call observe that managers thought they know what the market thinks about the brand. They think that they know what the consumers think. And there's no need for additional info because I know that already. Why would I jerk around with these analytics to tell me what I already know? So if there's a mentality that I already know the answer, then that's going to be a challenge to the analytics adoption. Moving along to the second question, describe the resulting consequences of lack of adoption for more data-inspired decision making. So there can be missed opportunities and slow sales growth, or lost customers, reduced retention. And that kind of follows with the previous comment that if you're not listening to your customers because you believe that you know the answer already, then there can be real downsides there where hidden in the data, there are signals that the customers are not using your products in the way that you'd like, or something of that. And so because you're not looking at the data because you know the answer already, you may be losing customers or facing other bad sorts of things. And you know, another kind of consequence of lack of adoption would be failed or stopped analytics projects. Finally, how can you tell when a company has embraced and truly adopted analytics? When the sales team is engaged and asking questions, not just sitting there and kind of waiting to get off the call and go to their next meeting, but when they're asking you questions about it, when they're engaged and they're embracing the data and they're excited about it, then you know that some adoption has happened there. And you know, to get there, it's a process, right? The data has issues in it. Oftentimes data is not clean, and we can try to comb those things beforehand, but you know, truth be told, a lot of issues are going to bubble out when that data finally gets used. And if a collaboration can happen between sales and analytics, and those folk can look at the analytics, they can ask questions about the analytics and the data, then that's an indication of adoption. But really, the next level up is if you can get someone in the organization to go against their gut feeling that they know the answer already, and instead adopt an analytics, then you know that they're trusting it. So are you arguing about the data or with the data? And you know, it makes us all cringe to think about all the times that we've had to argue about the data rather than with the data. And if you can get people to be engaged, ask questions, and eventually trust the data so they go against their gut feel, then you're there. All right.
That's brilliant, Ron. You had a good team, it sounds like. And I could tell when I popped in all the great things that were happening there. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yep,
and here was the team: Ron, John, Carl, Evelina, David, Crystal, and Anil. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Karen from Coca-Cola, can you guys share what your team talked about?
We had in our group Kiara, Raphael, Madvi, and Carrie. So some of the things that they discussed, or that we discussed, was on the barriers about how credibility is crucial. You know, sometimes it's hard to establish it or even confirm when you have that credibility, but it is crucial to adoption. And then effective communication. Another point brought up was about the time sensitivity of the data. Because it may apply to a current analysis, but it may not be able to be replicable for a future analysis. So if it's only a one-time instance, it may not be adopted well, you know, across the stakeholders. Lastly, we talked about scarce talent. The organizations do not have access to the right talent. And one example was about, do you train a finance person on analytics, or do you hire a person that's strong in analytics and teach them the basics of finance? So I don't know if that's something that other companies are challenged with on building capabilities. Some of the consequences or lack of adoption around of not adopting analytics would be lack of satisfaction, of course, with your customers or stakeholders, the very most important one there. And then overall, just the overall lack of competitive advantage. We do want to use the analytics to try to create that competitive advantage, as we discussed before. But if we don't have it, or if it's not, analytics aren't adopted effectively, then we may lose what competitive advantage we may have already had previously. And you have to ensure you're using the information accurately and the effects of it. So you can do a lot of analytics, but if you're not using it effectively, then the customers or stakeholders may not see the value in it. Some common themes there. And then finally, how can you tell when a company has truly adopted analytics? The customers, as mentioned before, are more interested in the results. Sometimes you may have to go through phases, small steps of first exploring the data and making awareness of the information, and then getting into deeper, stronger analytics with your stakeholders, and transition along that, the phases of going from just diagnostics to more predictive analytics.
Awesome. This is great, Karen. Thank you so much. It sounds like you had a wonderful group as well. So I hope you guys all connect with each other on LinkedIn, and you made some good relationship points. Awesome. A couple of things, Brian and I have been talking in the background. And so Brian, feel free to add color. But in summary, I poked in, like I mentioned, through a lot of rooms, and I kept hearing these common themes come up over and over. And I think the top ones that we heard were around education, advocacy. Don't just assume that people are going to, like, as you can see, you have to advocate. You have to have someone that's a champion for analytics. So education, advocacy. Think about analytics adoption in almost stages. You don't try to go for, boiling the ocean or answering the biggest problem first. So think about it in stages. Take the time to build the trust with your stakeholders and your internal or external clients, where you've proven that you're trustworthy and that what analytics is doing is not, black magic or anything. And I think the final theme that's the big one is just remember, it's a journey. It's hard not to get sort of impatient with, like, gosh, I made this great stuff. Just absorb it, just take it, just consume it and use it already. But it is a journey. And so we have to remember sort of needs change. People become more educated and the data changes, and it's a path. It's not a one-time, here it goes kind of thing. Brian, did you have anything to add to the summary? Sir?
Yeah, I think you covered it well, Beverly. And I would say, maybe as a takeaway for those who participated, and selfishly, I invited a lot of Georgia Power people to this, hoping that we could, as an organization, start thinking about our analytics and our data differently. And so that would be my challenge to you. If you participated, especially a Georgia Power participant or Southern Company, what can you take away from this where you think differently about analytics, analysis, and data as we move forward in our journey sort of as a company, right? And even if you're not, maybe that's a takeaway for you as well, which is, what about analytics adoption can I do differently? Can I think differently? And how can I move my company, my business, my function forward? That's kind of my challenge and thought about this is, this is a great opportunity to learn from others outside of our company, outside of your specific, discipline, and talk with them, engage with them, right? And so hopefully in doing that, you gain some additional perspective. You had a chance to hear what other people are doing and can take away from that, as part of our journey, where you are and how you can, sort of advance in that personally, professionally, etc.
Awesome. Thank you again, Brian. Brian's the one, by the way, that sort of encouraged us to do this from the beginning. So thanks for getting us started on this, and thank you for participating. Just a few closing remarks from Mark Ferguson. Would you like to share screen, or are you just going to talk to us?
I'm just going to talk, Beverly, if that's all right.
Sure thing.
So, I mean, this is a great topic, and I really enjoyed hearing all the different perspectives on it. I want to share just a little bit from kind of my own experience coming from starting really as a research faculty doing analytics work. And there's a lot of similarities, I think, between the workplace there, but some differences too that's probably worth pointing out, because there might be some practices, best practices you can pick up from the academic side. One is, like, we have to, as a researcher, really present and defend our work in front of a very smart but skeptical audience all the time. So we're used to being challenged, and that's a very healthy thing. And it's not a natural thing, though, especially our doctoral students. When we're training them, we usually kind of are intentionally fairly hard on them, really pushing them to make sure they can validate what they're, suggesting their research shows, for example. And I tell ours, all the time, look, it's much better to be beaten up here than to go out into the open marketplace, and then have someone poke holes in your research. So I think this applies over in the corporate world as well. Get some focus groups, get some colleagues, get some people who understand the analytics, hopefully even better than maybe you do. And before you're presenting to maybe your senior management team or something, practice with those groups. Invite them for constructive criticism. In fact, encourage it. Say, try to poke holes in this. Try to help me find what I'm missing. I would even maybe say, go over to who you think might hold the opposite opinion to what you're, trying to promote, or the views you're trying to get across. And invite them and say, look, this is the analysis I've done. Tell me where you think I'm wrong. It's much better to kind of do that in the off the side type of conversation than to have that battle right in front of the boss. So I think that's just a good practice. I'm kind of in this interesting area now. I came from that research thing. Now I'm basically in middle management. In academia, I'm a senior associate dean, so I'm doing, reports to the deans and provosts and presidents and stuff. And they don't always have the analytics training that I was used to with my colleagues. So I've learned another technique is, don't present kind of at the level above your audience, but have the more in-depth, always have the more in-depth analysis as a backup. And I'll give a really quick example of this, right? So one debate we were having, with COVID, we had a lot of students that were applying that didn't have a chance to take SAT, or ACT tests compared to other reasons. And having this internal debate, like, how many students do you bring in that don't have those test scores? There was a lot of anxiety about that, but I actually did some analysis of our past students and try to look at what's the best predictors of success in the business school here in South Carolina. And it turns out that SAT or ACT scores were more of a secondary indicator. The primary indicator was this weighted GPA that we're able to calculate. But that was not the general intuition of our senior leadership. So I could have presented to them and said, okay, here's my logistic regression model, here's all the factors I included, here's this big long table, and I'm showing you the p-values and all. But that would have been, I probably would have lost them when I said logistic regression, right? So instead I just presented it very visually and said, okay, well, here's the graph of progression, here's the graph of like GPAs. But I had all that other information in the background. I think especially when we're kind of younger in our careers, you don't ever want to hold back anything. Like, you've done all this analysis, you want to show the highest level you did, you want to kind of show off. That's not always the most effective. So those were just some thoughts I had, Beverly.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate you very much. And it is good to draw parallels where we can. And this sort of phenomenon sort of shows itself in academic institutions, within corporate America, within nonprofit, especially within nonprofit, from what I can tell. So it's not a once and done sort of thing. It's an ongoing challenge that we have and that we're ready to face. A couple of announcements are, let me just thank all of the discussion leads, and I know I'm going to leave some people out. So if you were a discussion lead, please feel free to hey, I was a discussion lead, but for sure I know Ron Menick, thank you very much. Karen Yarborough from Coca-Cola, Marcel, Jeremy, I don't know if you got to serve as a discussion lead, but I've called on you numerous times before. Leland, thank you very much for serving. Bob, thank you for serving. Looks like Kathy, and you did that on the spot with no real training. So thank you, Kathy, Alex. So thanks to all the discussion leads. And who did I miss? I know I've missed a couple.
You missed me, your star.
Oh, Shashank, of course. Thank you, Shashank, for serving. If you guys want to put your results in the chat, there's a lot of interest around this topic, and we're going to send out follow-up messages to everyone. So thank you for putting all that in there. And a couple of quick announcements that I have for you guys, and then I'll ask Melissa if she has anything else for me to share, or if anything she wants to share. So this is rapid fire. We're running one of the first master model competition, multi-school, multidisciplinary competitions. And so this is in partnership with the Atlanta University Center, which is Clark Atlanta University, Spelman and Morehouse, and then Emory University. So this is 5 schools. And this is sponsored by Boeing. If you're interested in getting involved, reach out to me if you want to serve as a judge or be a part of this exciting competition. We also have a new executive education program that is offered in collaboration with University of Georgia. Mark Cicchini is on the Zoom right now, and so he's in charge of this program, Essentials of Data Science, with University of Georgia. So you can reach out to me and I'll send you to Mark. So that way you don't have to spell his name. It's a little complicated. Also, we have our upcoming forum called Applied Analytics Forum 2021, Return on Data. This is a University of South Carolina thing. I know I'm wearing 2 hats right now, Access Group, University of South Carolina. And our keynote speaker is Dr. Wes Char from Catalina Marketing, who happens to be the same company where Ron Menick is. And then the second to last is that we have a new podcast that we call Analytics Out Loud. And Mark Ferguson, who you just heard from, will be our first guest on that podcast. And we're going to pair academics with practitioners to discuss innovation applications and advancements in analytics. I have an existing podcast called Tag Data Talk through Technology Association of Georgia. Analytics Out Loud is through University of South Carolina. So we are looking for guests that are willing to pair up with our academics and serve as a 2-person panel for the upcoming podcast. It's super fun, very easy. You'll love it. And then the last announcement is that the University of South Carolina just started the Master of Science in Business Analytics program. So if you want to know more about the Master of Science Business Analytics 1-year program, then of course you can reach out to me and I'll connect you to the right people. Our next Analytics Think Tank Roundtable is June the 15th. You will receive some follow-up emails from us. Well, I think 1 email that will talk about this. If you will please also, please provide some feedback. We're going to send you the link for that. And that will also give us some ideas about the next subtopic for our roundtable coming up. Linda, did you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Brent Louie is going to be a guest speaker for the Applied Analytics Club, and everyone is welcome. And his topic is going to be fascinating: how to build multidisciplinary analytics team. He's like the chief data officer for people analytics at Train Technologies. So if you could, Leland could send that out, I think that would be great.
Awesome. Awesome. Leland, if you want to send me information to send out to this group, I can do that in the follow-up. Great. And thanks to Scott Reedy, he's my boss and he puts up with all this stuff that I do all the time. Thanks to Mark Ferguson, he's my other boss and he puts up with all the stuff that I do all the time. Shashank is my personal boss, so you know I have all these bosses. And like I said, we'll send out.
Can I ask something real quick? So two
Yes,
things.
sir.
One is your USC email address.
Yes,
And
it's
and second thing is, I'm sure someone is on point to capture everything in the chat and
yes,
share it.
yes, I'm on
Excellent.
point for that, and I'm putting my U of SC email in the chat, and I'll also put my Access Group one in there as well.
Perfect.
So
Thank you.
it's really exciting to see these two groups come together. I love it when my worlds collide. So thanks again to everybody. Melissa, any final comments?
Just on behalf of Access Group, thank you to you, Beverly, for all you do and for helping us organize this with the Darla School of Business. And also thank you to our panelists. They were wonderful and great experts. We love working with you. And to our discussion leads, as you already mentioned, thank you to all of you. We appreciate your efforts here as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.